I think it's so important. We all want to be kind of acknowledged for the hard work we put in or what's important to us. So validation. Yeah, I believe it's important.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this week's episode of It Takes Grit. I have got a dear friend on the line today. Erica, welcome to the show. So great to have you.
Rebecca-Louise, this is such an honor. I love seeing your face again. I mean, we've had you on my podcast, Fashion Love Pursuit, twice. I just love seeing your face, and it's such an honor to be in this space. Thank you.
I love it. I feel like every time I go into Instagram or Facebook, your face pops up, and it always makes me smile. And I'm just like the first one to like everything. I think we
likewise. Likewise, I love it.
That's awesome. So welcome. I've got so many questions to dive in and ask you today. And you know, those of you who are listening at home, I know that this episode is going to help you so much because we all have fear of negativity, a belief system that we've created in our head. We all have boundaries that we need to create, toxic relationships that we might be in, and how to, you know, kind of get rid of that validation that we need from somebody else. So many great topics, and Erica is the perfect person to chat with this to. But first of all, take us back about your story, why you're in LA, who you are, what you do, and yeah, just a little bit about you.
Okay, where to begin? Well, I'm actually from Los Angeles, so I haven't really departed the area I grew up in. So I'm one of the rare people that have stayed around and born here. So my story, let's see where to begin. So you spoke about limiting beliefs and struggles and everything. And I'm familiar with where it stemmed from. And a lot of it came from feeling that I wasn't enough and that I was stupid and not worthy. And so I was really trying to fill that void in so many ways. And it really trickled into my relationships, especially. But I'll take you a little back. So my furthest memory is probably third grade. So third grade, I was in classes that were not the same as most students. It came to be classes that were for learning disabilities. My learning disability was an auditory memory disorder, came to find out, which is basically I would hear something and it was hard for me to retain that information. So I struggled a lot. So of course that made me feel less than and stupid than all the other kids. So that was more reinforced when I entered a relationship at a very young age, 13, and the guy was 16. And we actually dated for 10 years. And we had a normal ups and downs and everything, but what really stood out a lot from that was the emotional abuse. He definitely felt reinforced that I was stupid or less than him and maybe not worthy. And so that was my big struggle. And I think it was at age 15 or 16, I attempted suicide. Reality check. I went to a home for 2 weeks and realized I wasn't as bad off as the kids that were there. And so from there, I started to kind of develop my self-confidence and everything. That relationship ended. And from there, took a little break and kind of getting to know myself. And then entering another relationship, it was quite loving. We were together for 5 years. And in that relationship, even though it was healthy in many aspects, the one thing I learned from that was I loved him more than myself. So I put a lot of value on him and the relationship, and I kind of neglected myself and didn't really honor I wasn't living up to my truth and really taking heart to what really was affecting me and opposed to his success, what his needs were and everything. So really what I'm trying to get at is I developed, I started to learn the lessons I needed to learn more. I learned a lot of lessons in the relationships that followed that. But one of the common things that were coming up was I didn't love myself. I really didn't truly value my worth or respect myself to the fullest extent. Like I had this false confidence, I would kind of say now that I look at it, is if I loved myself, I wouldn't do the things I did, or if I truly value myself, I wouldn't let somebody disrespect me. So the lessons I learned in that I needed to take a hard look at myself and realize I was a common denominator in all these things, and the same pattern kept coming up. So I knew something needed to change about me. And so that's when I took radical responsibility for how I was showing up, who the woman I was being. And through that journey, I just developed really a radical knowing of who I am, the authentic person I am, stripped of all the fears, all the doubts, all the limiting beliefs, and just rooted to the values I have, and just getting to really know myself. So yeah, that's like kind of in a nutshell my story. So my struggles have definitely propelled my growth. I really believe that life is not happening to us, but I mean, this is a common saying, it's not happening to us, it's happening for us. And those lessons in life, my goodness, they are there to serve us for our highest good. So
absolutely. And I'm going to start to unravel a little bit of your story, because I know that some people are going to have some more questions. So I read it was like, so third grade is like 10 years old, right? Because I have a lot of people in Europe, and we don't know anything by grades. By the way, when you ask somebody how old they are in America, they don't tell you their age, they tell you what grade they're in.
That's funny.
It's the funniest thing. So 10 years old, you're told that you have, something where you can't retain information. Now, did that carry on? How long was that there for? Is that still something that you struggle with? What is that?
I love that you asked that question, because I'm going to be radically honest here. I so struggle with my memory. It's this short-term memory, actually. So for me, it's actually, and I, for the longest time, would not say yes to being on somebody else's podcast, or even when I recorded you before or after this, but for the longest time, I wouldn't even do video, because I'm like, I need to look at my notes. I can't remember what I'm going to ask. And so I needed some direction. So I still struggle with it. And, I still have that limiting belief that, I have such a bad memory, and I'm trying to suppress it and trying to like reinforce it with positive feedback. But yeah, I absolutely still struggle with it. I have to take a conscious effort to remember things, and really, I have to visualize things as well to retain the information. So the auditory is where I struggled the most.
I think what's pretty important, what you said there, was that, it's not something that defines you. Sometimes people get diagnosed with something, or they get something and that becomes their story. Like you and I have both done Tony Robbins. So it's like, change your story, change your life. And if you keep saying to yourself, I have this memory issue, I have this memory issue, like, it's almost like that becomes your identity. And then that becomes like who you are, where really at the core, it's not who you are. You are a loving, beautiful soul, and maybe there's, extra things that we have challenge with along the way, but it's not something that, I feel like sometimes people cling on to something that makes them feel special and important because they've had, a diagnosis of something, and then that becomes your identity. But you seem to be like, okay, it's something that I understand that's there, but it's not, I don't need it to be unique. I don't need it to be special.
Yeah. And that's a really important point, is that we can't let that define us. Like our limitations, number one, it's our brain trying to really keep us safe. And we stick to this story that we have, and we have to learn how to retrain our brain to look for the truth in it, right? So like going through the process of rewriting your limiting beliefs, there is actually a process, because it's something that was formed. These thoughts were formed at such a young age. They say between 7 to 12 are core, the age that affects us the most, where all our subconscious beliefs are formed. And so how we are an adult, it stems from such a young age. So we have to rewrite these stories, right? And, it's funny you bring that up, because right now this is total different subject, but right now I'm working on my posture. So I'm so committed to fixing my posture. And one of the stories I would have told myself is I have a shoulder drop and I have a very arched back. And I would tell myself, this is just the way I am. And I would think it's not fixable. Now I have complete confidence. I could totally retrain my body and put it back in position of where we're meant to be. It's just, practicing over and over and over, and retraining our brain, and also not being so attached to what that story we tell ourselves. It's so important.
It is. And I had to let go of a story last year about myself because I was like, the reason I'm like this in these situations is because this is what happened to me when I was 15 years old. And then when someone said, well, what if it didn't have to be like that? I was like, but you don't understand. Like, this happened to me. It's terrible. And they're like, I'm not saying that it's not terrible, but what if you didn't feel like this in certain situations? I'd be like, well, I'd feel really good, and it was just like, hey, I don't have to have that to be the reason why I'm struggling in this situation. It's like, hey, yes, that wasn't a great thing that happened to me. But if I'm going to allow that to dictate my life and things in other situations, then that's my own choice. So, I appreciate you sharing that story. It's like, oh, well, I can never have a great posture. I just have one shoulder that's slower than the other. My spine is like kind of crazy curvy, like whatever. It's just like, okay, we just got to retrain our body. And maybe they're the areas we have to work a little bit harder on.
Yes, so, exactly.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, okay, that relationship that you get in. You're 13 years old, dating a 16-year-old. So at that age, that's a big gap at that time. How did you guys meet? What were your friends saying? What were your parents saying? Your family? How did that evolve?
Oh gosh, take me back. So actually he was my next door neighbor that moved in next door. So that was convenient. So the age, obviously between that big gap, that's how we met, is because he lived next door. And my sister is actually 2 years older, so she was closer to him, but we connected more. Of course, my parents were kind of skeptical at first, but it worked out. And like you mentioned, it's a big age gap, and the reason why it's important. And when I look back at this, why this was so critical of how much it affected me is I grew up with him. So from 13 to 23, I dated him. And that's that's a long span, number one. And the years that I'm growing probably the most, we go through these stages in life. So I started liking what he liked or did what he did with his friends. And, I didn't really step into who I was. It was more like I was in the relationship and becoming more like him or whatever it may be. So honestly, after that relationship is when I actually got to reflect on myself and who am I as a woman? Like, who is my authentic self? I know growing up, especially in school in my young years, I was so detached from who I was, and I didn't know who I was. And I think a lot of us could relate to that, is really not being so aware of what are our values, what are our beliefs, what's important to us. We don't realize that until we do that self-reflection. So that was a really critical thing, is being able to really define who am I,
Yeah, and I think when you're in a relationship, like, even if you're not trying, like, you do sort of morph into sometimes the other person, if you're not completely solid within yourself. I've been in relationships where I've just wanted to make the other person happy. And I would just do, of course, yeah, I want to go to this place. I want to go to that place. I look back, I'm like, no, that's not what you wanted to do. Like, whatsoever, that's not your true authentic self. And I think you have to do a lot of work on yourself and not being with anybody to really truly find out what it is that you want, and so that you can be strong in that next relationship, which is so important.
So important.
What, in terms of when you went back to, like, you said that you tried to commit suicide at 15, 16, what was it that led to that? What was it that made you feel so bad that you just didn't want to be here anymore?
And it honestly, it had a lot to do with the relationship. So, and also probably feeling less than, and how he emotionally abused me, so I believe we were broken up at this point. And to be honest, I think it was more a cry for help, a cry for attention, in the reason why I was attempting suicide. Because I know if I really, really wanted to do it, I probably would have done it. So I really think it was a cry for help, if I look back at the situation. And, what I overdosed in was Zoloft. So I was taking an antidepressant. And a lot of more studies have been done on this, that it actually can increase depression. So, it was a good reality check, because again, I when I look back at it now, it was a cry for help. It was a cry for wanting to be seen, wanting to feel like I was enough, wanting to be loved. And again, with all the personal development work I've done now I know what everything in my life, where it all stemmed from. And as you know, the most common fears are not being loved or not feeling enough. And I had both those. So
Yeah, and especially as a woman too, Tony Robbins talks about the 3 U's and the 3 C's. I talked about this at my event. It's like, women want to feel safe, they want to feel seen, and they want to, they want to feel like they are, that they're loved. That's like a massive part of it. And if you're going, especially through your teenage years, you've got somebody else that's, having influence on you. That's huge. What do you think now you're in another relationship? Now talk us through your next relationship and how that's different, because I want to talk to the person out there that's like, maybe they're in a relationship, but they don't know if that's the one, because you don't always think like the grass is always greener on the other side. I've had clients that I've worked with that just haven't been in a happy relationship. And it's like, but then you're like, well, is it really better on the other side? Like, is it like, am I being treated badly? Or like, there's like uncertainty, I feel. So take us through those relationships and how now that you are in the right place.
Yeah, I love this question. It's a really important question because I think this is part of the work we need to do. And you could probably relate to this because I think you touched on this a little bit. So once I realized, so I kept on getting the lessons, like got first on 101 level, 201 level, 301, and just getting louder and louder. And finally, till I broke down and I'm like, okay, enough is enough. If nothing changes, nothing changes. So I took complete ownership of and responsibility for my life. I'm like, okay, I'm the common denominator. Something needs to change. What needs to change? I don't know. But I decided to go back to a life coach that I worked with 2 times before. But this time I was super, super intentional in doing the work, very committed. And that was super important, that intentional part. So when I was I made sure anytime I was talking to her or anytime I was doing her workshop, I was home with my notepad. I was being very intentional and just listening to her, no distractions. That really made a difference in this time working with her. So what we did, part of the process was honestly uncovering what was my blocks, what was standing in my way. And honestly, it was myself. So all these doubts, misbeliefs, and stories I was telling myself were just holding me back from really, number one, being connected to myself and also knowing what I wanted and really taking a stand for that, right? So as far as uncovering and like I said, one of my biggest struggles was relationships. That's what hit me the most. That's what I struggled most in. I had loving relationships and long-term relationships, but I kept on getting the same result. So what I did is I basically answered the questions like, what do I want? Who am I? What are my values? What are my beliefs? What do I want in a partner? And I'm not talking about, the looks and everything. It's like, really, what do you want? Characteristics. And that is super important. Once you get that clarity, then you're able to see the full picture and maybe stop going after the things that aren't that. And that's really important. But also I rewrote my limiting beliefs, the stories I was telling myself. So I was getting more connected to myself and stripping myself of all that negativity. But most important was that clarity. That's what gave me more like, okay, if I meet this person and he is missing this aspect that's super important to me, then I need to reevaluate, like, why should I go forward, or should I, stop dating this person? So funny enough, after I did this work, literally probably when I was towards the end of the course, I then met my boyfriend, Noah, and we hit it off immediately. It was very fast for us. We just knew. We fell in love really rapidly, and I moved in probably 2 months after. So he's everything I wrote down on the paper of what I want in a man. Like, he has every characteristic that is just so valued to me. So I really think that what was so important is you need to be clear on what you want, and you need to be clear on who you are. And most importantly, are you being the person that deserves what you want? I think that's the most important step, is like, if you want somebody that's respectful, that has integrity, that's honest, that, is driven, or whatever it may be, are you being that person to attract that type of person? Because if you're lazy and you want a driven person, it just doesn't go, right? So that's important.
Yeah, that's so true. You have to be that person, because you are what you attract. So for you, what were the things that you wrote down? Were you manifesting things? Were you writing it down? Like, what was it that you were like, this is the type of person that I want to be with forever? What were those values?
Yeah. So integrity, I wanted somebody I could trust, feel safe with, that is honest, that communicates, that's vulnerable. Vulnerability is a huge thing for me, and communication. Those are like probably the two number one qualities I need in somebody, because I am that person. I have to have communication, and anybody that retracts from communication, it's like a void I'm missing. So those were some characteristics. I want somebody that's like fun, witty, playful, adventurous, active, that cares about their health and well-being, because I do. So those were some of the most important that I can remember off the top of my head.
That's beautiful. And so I want to talk about like validation real quick, because yes, we want to find validation within ourselves. Like we have to do that. We can't find it from somebody else. But how important is it to be with somebody that also validates you? I mean, is that something that's important to you? Like, not that you have to have constant validation from somebody else that you're enough, but how do you feel that somebody else makes you feel that you're enough?
I think it's super important. I think you need somebody that's kind of like your cheerleader, because somebody that like pumps you up. If somebody's not showing that they're enthusiastic about your dreams, your goals, or your accomplishments, then you feel kind of that void. I think it's so important to have validation from your partner. And I don't mean this in to pump your ego up. It's more like, I support you. I love you. I love seeing you happy and successful. And I think it's so important. We all want to be kind of acknowledged for the hard work we put in or what's important to us. So validation. Yeah, I believe it's important.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that too, because yes, we have to find our own validation within ourselves. Like, yes, you can't just go in and expect it from somebody else, but you do want someone to be your cheerleader. Like, it is important to have someone that's, you've done something and they're just giving you a high five, or like, I feel like, people show their appreciation in different ways, but it depends what you need. Do you need someone who's going to be, your hype squad, your hype guy, your hype girl, be that cheerleader in the corner? I think that's so important. And, yeah, I really do feel that, you can be successful up to a point, but if you don't have that partner with you who is allowing you to get to that next level, I feel like there is a stop. There has to be somebody else. Obviously, if somebody's giving you more cheers on and encouraging you more, you're going to be able to take it to the next level. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so important. It's a good thing that you're mentioning that, because I don't think it's an egotistical thing to want that. It's just you want to be a team. I think you with your partner, you want to feel like you're a team.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. So what does your partner do? How long have you guys been together with now?
We just celebrated a 2-year anniversary, and he's a writer, producer of TV and film.
Amazing. Yeah, and so you've got that creativeness together and drive.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. So let's talk quickly about boundaries. Because I know there was one thing that you kind of really, you're like, yes, I want to talk about this. Because obviously you were in a relationship for 10 years, probably didn't have any boundaries. And you've created this, this way of life where you don't. I mean, I've had, so many situations, with people that I haven't had boundaries at all. I'm just like super open. I'm an open book. It's like everybody just roll in, whatever. But how did you create boundaries after a 10-year relationship like that? And what do you do now?
So boundaries, I think, are so important. And I'm learning actually a lot more about this. One of the boundaries I'm trying to set right now, and this is different than my relationship, but is boundaries around my morning routine and boundaries around my work schedule. So and it's a part of self-care, self-love, is creating boundaries for yourself, because then you're able to optimize your time and energy into yourself, and then you could outpour onto others. So I think it's so important. But boundaries, as far as a relationship, like you said, definitely the 10-year relationship, no boundaries. The 5-year relationship following that, there were boundaries, because I was more connected with myself. So I did speak my truth more often. But when we had some external struggles outside of a relationship, it kind of created a little turmoil between both of us. And then, so again, I think through the work I did on my own and taking that radical responsibility and also getting to know myself more, I think that's when I really started to develop these boundaries. Because I like I just stated, I think boundaries is a form of self-love and self-care. So when it comes to him and I, we both, him being a writer, usually most people that are writers, they're very creative in the morning. So I have to really respect his space in the morning, be really quiet. And the great thing is I love my morning routine. So it helps me, create the space for him and also for myself. So we're definitely, we've had a couple struggles with the boundaries because I'm super talkative in the morning. For a writer, that's the last thing you want to do when you're writing is be interrupted. So it's something that actually I have to change kind of the way I am to adjust to him, just to respect his boundaries, and also just kind of look at it as like, oh, actually I could just go within and do what I need to do in the morning, and then we could connect later. So I think boundaries are so important, but also, it's all about communication, speaking what is important to you. What do you need from a partner? What do you need to fill that void for yourself, or whatever it may be? It's really that communication. I think it's so important.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It is. It's like knowing what you want to, and also just having those, I think open communication is so important. Like you don't know anything if you can't communicate, you're not being open and honest about how you feel. You're just kind of going down a rabbit hole, and then so much tension builds up, and then you have no boundaries whatsoever. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. How has 2020 been for you?
You know what? Okay. Let me reflect right now. So 2020, well, it's a wild ride. Let me just tell you, it's definitely been a roller coaster ride with lots of turns and twists and upside downs and everything. But I will say, one thing I'll be honest with, I've been in the same self-employed job for a long time as a fit model, which is basically a live mannequin for clothing manufacturers. So I fit clothes. So I'll try on jeans, I'll fit it to my body, and then mass produce it for other sizes. So I've been doing this for about 16 years now, full time, kind of crazy. But I haven't loved it for probably like 8 years of this time. So it's something that I've actually been trying to get out of for a while. I've been trying to figure out what is that thing that I'm meant to do? What's my passion? What's my purpose? I used to be a fashion designer. That is no desire to do that anymore. So going back, and so the reason why I bring that up is for, like I said, 8 years, I've been struggling and trying to figure out what it is, what am I supposed to do? And I'm always quite busy with it. So it leaves me little time when I come home to focus on something else. And I just do it for money. So there's no fulfillment there, no purpose other than, I'm fitting clothes for other people and making money. So yeah, when 2020 hit, when the quarantine happened, I was like, this is a blessing. It's stressful, right? I had to figure out what I need to do to make money because I don't know what will happen. It's definitely when retail is affected, wholesales were affected. So it was stressful, and I was really like trying to hustle when it first happened. And I was putting a lot of pressure, a lot of stress on myself. And luckily, there was this thing that came up, a challenge called the Rise Up Challenge. That was a 20-day challenge, and I decided to join it. And it was an everyday thing. So it was like a personal development, career, mindset, and all these things. And I was really intentional when I was doing it. I was very focused. So I decided to release the pressure I had on the hustle and instead switch into personal development and bettering myself. And so the great thing about 2020 for me has been somewhat a gift, and that is the time. So it was the time that I always felt I lacked, and the pressure I had, or the pressure I had of just not having time. So to me, it was a blessing that I was able to have the time to work on myself, to get really clear on the direction I want to head. And within this time, I did develop clarity of completely where I want to head and the passion and purpose I meant to serve and that I'm stepping into. And I've been focusing on my podcast that has been doing really well. And, it's been a blessing in the sense that it gave me more clarity of where I want to take things from now. And I honestly didn't focus a lot on friendships. This is one thing that I feel I went so within and so focused on where I wanted to grow that I wasn't really trying to grow relationships because I felt like I needed to get my house clean first, if you want to say. And I'm actually dealing with one of my closest friends that I've been friends with about 10 years, we're actually having now a conversation of where our friendship is heading, because funny enough, we talked about communication and boundaries. She didn't communicate to me how she was feeling, and she really needed a friend during the quarantine, but she didn't communicate it, and I was just doing my thing. And so now we're having the communication, but I'm like, well, if you told me these things, I would have known, and then I would have been able to be there and be more present if I were to have known. So of course the volcano erupted. So it's so important to communicate and really get in tune with yourself. So for me, 2020 in the summary is just, it's been a blessing, even through all the craziness and, struggles or whatnot and the chaos we see around us. I've really been trying to just keep my house tidy and develop healthier habits. I've developed a morning routine I love. I've developed more sense of self, and my relationship is great. Everything has improved besides that one relationship.
And sometimes it's just when you do grow, you grow out of other relationships. The more that you grow, sometimes it's like, sometimes a relationship is there to be there for 2 years, to be there for 10 years. Like sometimes relationships are not there to be forever. Thank you for openly sharing that with us. And, it's interesting because so many people have had to pivot this year. Do you think that you're going to go back to fit modeling? Like what's going to be next for you? How do you transition, and what's 2021 for you?
Good question. So I am fit modeling still right now. I was fitting all during quarantine as well, just very limited amount. And this is where the boundaries come in. So I'm being very particular with my scheduling. Now that I've developed this morning routine, I'm like, nothing starts before 10 a.m. So that's my boundary. And then also I'm trying to dedicate 2 days to podcasting and also anything else that I'm pursuing. So I'm just kind of creating boundaries around that. I actually, a couple weeks ago, I started to get freaked out because I was starting to fit more. And again, it's taking my time, and it's pulling me away from the thing that I want to go after. So I was feeling honestly out of whack, because that was the one thing I struggled with for so long. So I think it's so important to have those boundaries so that you can be in the right state to pursue what you want to pursue. So that's really where I'm trying to head, is just, focus on what I'm trying to create and create boundaries around the, work that I need to obviously have.
Yeah. And I have a question about the fit modeling. Do you feel like you have a certain pressure to, have to stay the same size? Like maybe you want to tone up, you want to increase your booty, increase your arms. Like, is it like you literally have not been able to change your body for 16 years?
Yes. Okay. So 16 years, I've remained the exact same size. Pretty much within a 1/4 inch. So since I fit denim, it's very, very specific to the 1/4 inch. So yes, definitely in the past, the reason why I wanted to get out of this job for so long is I'm like, I want to do a cleanse. If I'm not feeling right, I'm not doing to lose weight, but if I want to do a cleanse because I was having so much gut issue, I actually started a cleanse and I lost weight in 5 days. I had to quit it. And I'm like, I can't even feel better, So there is restrictions, and that's why it's a very particular job. You get paid well because it's so specific, and you have to remain the same size. It's so critical. And a lot of, actually a lot of fit models after quarantine gained weight because, they didn't have the gym, or they just got lazy, whatever it may be, whatever their reasoning. So it is very particular. And yes, I always want to improve my body. I always want to feel my best. So I don't like having limitations on that. But luckily, I know my body so well, and I'm happy with my body. I always want to refine it, if you want to say, but I'm content with my body. And I've learned to master my body. So I don't sway too much either which way. So that's a fortunate thing. And I'm lucky for that, because I've been able to be just so aware of what changes my body if I can't change, Yeah.
And 16 years is a long time to maintain something. Do you feel like like free or different if you're like, I don't have to be a certain size or anything? Do you think it would change your mentality or just how you felt at all? Because I feel like that's for me, that would be a lot of pressure. Like, I think that's amazing. I think a lot of people listening to this are going to be like, oh my goodness, how can you manage to maintain the same size, for 16 years? I mean, that takes a lot of mental discipline. So I want to give you a lot of freaking credit for that.
Oh, thank you. I think early on, I think I struggled with it so much. And actually that's what created my gut issues and everything, because I was on the high protein diet. I would sometimes do the cabbage thing when it came out. I think I struggled more at the beginning, but now that I've just learned what works for me, and I think that's so important. I think we talked about that, is creating a lifestyle that works for you. I'm not about diets at all. I do believe in working out. I believe in eating clean, but once you get to a place you want to be. So obviously somebody that needs to lose a lot of weight, it's going to be a little different, but I'm already, relatively where I want to be. So it's very easy for me to, and especially I have to remain the same size. It's easy for me to maintain that because I know what works for me. I know what's going to make me, like, if I were to eat late at night, I'm going to wake up more bloated. There's things that you just learn about yourself and how your body reacts. And I think that's so important. I'm sure for your community, it matters so much to develop this awareness of what works for you. And like, if you want to build a bigger butt, you're going to do more butt exercises. So you just get to know yourself more and you feel the difference naturally.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I know my body so well. I can feel when I'm just like, I just was in Colorado for a week and, we were hiking and stuff, but I was definitely eating and drinking more than I would. But like the day I come back, I was like in a hot yoga class. I was, back on my program. Like, you just have to be, like you said, aware of it. And I think if you're, if you're like, oh my goodness, I've put on, like 15 pounds, it's like, remember how you feel when you've put on that first 5 pounds, so that you can kind of nip it in the bud before it gets, to a point where it is unhealthy. And I think that's really important, is just being aware of your body.
Yeah. And I'll add to that. I think it's important, the why of why you want to remain healthy or do workouts or do fitness, whatever it may be. What is your why? Like for me, I want to feel good. I want to have energy. I want to look good. I do. I really want to look good. So all these things. And also I want to keep my job. If I need to remain the same size, I got to work at it, right? I'm committed to this. So you got to be so committed to your why, but it has to be a deep enough why. It's not just like, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds because I want to fit in this dress and, the end of the month or whatever. It has to be like a bigger picture why and make it a lifestyle. I think that's so important.
Yeah, I think so too. Wow, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I could literally chat with you, girl, all day long. We'll have to actually meet up and do coffee. Because whereabouts are you in LA?
I'm in Hancock Park. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love it up there. Beautiful. Cool.
And you just moved to Newport Beach, or where is it?
Newport Coast, basically.
And that's amazing.
Yeah. So we're probably about an hour away from each other. I love it. Awesome. Well, tell everybody where they can find you and all the things that you got going on.
Perfect. Well, so you could find me. I live mostly on Instagram. So Erica Lippy, it's ERICA-LIPP, like Peter Y, or Passion Love Pursuit, which is my podcast. So Passion Love Pursuit, it's mostly a personal development podcast. I have great guests like Rebecca-Louise, of course, and I'd love for you to come hang on there as well. And then Facebook, Erica Lippy, and my website, ericalippy.com. That's where you can find me.
Yay! Well, we're going to put all the links as well in the podcast. So everybody make sure that you go and give Erica some love. Go follow her and check out her podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of It Takes Grit. We will see you next week. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
And then I kept hearing in my mind's eye, Michelle, you've got to find a rhythm to have resilience through the reset. So what I did is I did a 30-day